Well, it looks as though we're in the middle actually of
Yeah.
what are they, resident doctors now, aren't they? The resident doctors strike, which I think you predicted. I know we had a pod a few weeks back, which I thought by this point most resident doctors would either have voted against or they'd have come to some sort of agreement with Wes Streeting and the government. But no, standing conversations they've had where Wes Streeting, who was talking about the collapse of the NHS as a result of this, had offered the resident doctors the opportunity to move their action to January to avoid hitting the service when it's undergoing great stress and strain because of the flu pandemic that's happening in this country at the moment. They've refused to, and they've come out and they're out at the moment. 5 days, I believe it is, isn't it?
Yeah.
I don't know what your view is on that. What you think in terms of what they're doing, whether they've got the moral high ground or whether you think they're
Well, we know we have discussed before our concerns over the number of trained doctors leaving the NHS, and often cited is pay. So we know that pay is a problem. Let's front that. But
yeah.
whether you agree with the sort of no conditions pay rise that Streeton gave last year, 28%, I think was, by a country mile, the highest pay award in the public sector, and I would imagine in most of the private sector.
Yeah.
They've done well relative to everyone else. To come back for more at this time when their whole reason for going into medicine, I would have thought, was to save lives and make people's lives better. I just find it totally bizarre when they could have caused a similar amount of damage in January, February, but not at quite a critical point. So you actually start to wonder about, I can't think of a better word, the nastiness of the decision makers. And it's also a quirk of democracy, isn't it? You know, I think it wasn't it 60-40, the ballot to strike?
Yeah.
But it was only, I think, just over 50% participated. So it's one of those where it's actually only 30% of their electorate.
Yeah.
And you get 30% of people driving the behavior of everyone and impacting the health of the nation. Doesn't sound right to me.
No. I mean, I'm a union man, generally speaking, but I feel the same, that this, on a number of levels, I think they're shooting themselves in the foot for starters, because I don't think they're going to get a more sympathetic government to their plight than they have at the moment.
No.
Certainly, the conversation this week and the debate this week from the Conservative side of the House has been that Kemi Badenoch would bring in a bill to outlaw strikes within the health service, which I just find that totally, this idea that you can outlaw strikes, I think is unreasonable, to be perfectly honest. I think people ought to have the right, but then in certain professions, there's a responsibility there. And this is, as you say, I think this is where probably across the health service, there is more of a responsibility. There's an argument that's being put forward at the moment, where Streeting is suggesting that the BMA has been hijacked by extremists who want to come out on strike, which I think is probably true. The representatives that I've seen of the BMA, I would have expected, I don't know, resident doctors, what the age range is, but I haven't seen anybody, I don't think, over the age of mid-20s, to be perfectly honest, speaking on their behalf. And when they're asked to justify what they're doing, like you were saying just now, I heard one of them ask the other day whether this would not endanger patients' lives, and he wouldn't give a straight answer. And then he was saying that the consultants will step in and their colleagues will step in to make sure that nobody's endangered and there's no change to the service, which was quite quickly knocked down by person asking the question. He said, well, if there's going to be no change to the service,
why do it?
What's the point in doing it in the first place? Yeah. And that's the same argument for doing it now, as you said, as opposed to doing it at the end of January, that they know that it's going to hurt the public more. I don't think that's the way to endear yourself if you're looking for a pay rise, is it?
And Streeting's basically said there's no more money, isn't he?
Yeah.
So this is terrible for patients in hospital now and their relatives. It's terrible for all those people who are having their elective surgery cancelled. So let's put that on the record, but it's also a test for Streeting, isn't it?
It is.
Is he's talking a very tough game, very
Mm,
impressive as
mm.
always. Is he going to hang tough or is he going to cave?
Well, that's the problem in terms of their having to show progress with regard to the health service, isn't it? In terms of
Mm.
winning waiting lists. And this, I'm sure, is part of the poker game that the resident doctors are playing because they know that he needs to show progress. But it's a very dodgy game because if you end up with a government after the next election that aren't favourable to the NHS, I mean, there's some suggestion that reform would even look at the NHS as a concept. And clearly, Conservatives are talking about making it illegal to go on strike. You're sort of cutting off the hand that feeds you, really, aren't you, to a degree? Much better, surely, to sit down with Streeting and work out where they go from here. I just find it inexplicable. They do need the trade union movement to work with them, this government. I mean, I noticed that I think it's Unison that have just elected an extreme left-wing member of the Labour Party to head them, and she's talking, as Unite have, about whether they're going to disassociate themselves from the Labour Party, which I think is quite. I'm not quite sure what they think. You know, at the end of the day, they might feel that their views, the people in charge of these unions, are more attuned to people like Jeremy Corbyn or even the Greens. But do they think that there's a likelihood of those parties getting into power? That is you're not going to influence decisions made at a national level if you're putting your money into admittedly a political party that will have more influence but won't necessarily be in government after the next election. It's
No,
a strange decision for union leaders to be making, in my view. You'd think they always up to now have stayed loyal to the Labour Party and influenced decision at Labour Party conferences. The BMA is obviously another one. I'm not sure that the BMA is affiliated to the Labour Party, but certainly Unite and Unison are. And I just find all of this jockeying a bit strange. You'd think they'd be working with the government to get what they want over a period of time, but we shall see how this impacts
well,
upon.
I think Streeting he made a big play on the run up to the election, didn't he? If he's the health minister, he's going to sit down with them within a week and all that sort of stuff, and he did do that. But I wonder if he now regrets that no conditions 28%, and how naive of him was it to not expect them once they tasted blood to come back for more. Whether he could have been a little bit more nuanced in the deal, but
Yeah,
that's gone. That's in the past.
it's in the past. Yeah,
And how he handles himself now will be quite a
yeah.
test. Quite a test.
I had a conversation with my other half about this yesterday because this is my union background coming into play here, because she was saying, well, why didn't, as you just said, why didn't Streeting use the this pay offer that he gave them last year, this 28%, to impose these conditions effectively? Part of me says what we're looking at here is they're taking industrial action upon the basis that their pay hasn't kept pace with inflation. So they're well over 28% down, to be fair to them, in respect of where they were.
It depends
15,
which
15,
measure of
20 years
inflation
ago.
you use,
Yeah.
but okay.
But either way, they're well below where they should have been, if their pay had kept pace with inflation. So it all behoves anybody then to start setting conditions to bring them back up to where they were. I mean, that's just not right. If you're paid for a certain job, you can't start banging on extra responsibilities just so as you can get back to where you should have been.
What you can do is you could still give them 28%, but you could have put some strings around it saying, right, and that's a 3-year deal or whatever to make sure you're not in the position you're now in. It's a moot point because it's gone. It's happened.
It depends upon what conditions you're putting on, I suppose. So I agree with you. Yeah. But I thought that was a 3-year deal. I thought that was where we are this year. He's given them another 5% this year, isn't he?
Yes, he has.
Which would take it up to 33, so it's a third of their previous salary. I suppose he just thought they'd be acting in an honourable fashion, which they haven't really, have they?
Doesn't look that way.
No.
But as you say, it may be that inadvertently it leads to the demise of the NHS.
Yeah.
A different administration or a coalition might take a different view. I think that's unlikely, but it could happen.
Yeah. Well, you mean they might pay them, bring them up to
No,
parity, will they be?
no. What I mean is, going forward in
Mm,
what would it be, 3 years' time, that if we have, say, reform, for example, winning the elections,
mm,
back to your point, does
mm,
that lead to a fundamental reassessment of how we provide healthcare? What it does show you, though, is that, and you can see why Osborne did it and whether it was right or wrong, but years and years of austerity carves away at not just public services in general, but at
mm,
people's livelihoods.
mm,
And often in negotiations, it depends on the power of the group, doesn't it? And if you have a group of doctors or a group of train drivers who can
mm.
disrupt the country big style,
Yeah.
then that's dangerous.
Nobody else can do their job, can they? They can't bring the army in
No,
to do
no,
the junior doctor's job.
no, you
Absolutely.
can't. No,
Yeah.
exactly. We cannot bring anyone else in to drive trains either. But a lot of people can work from homes. But hospitals, you can quickly bring not quite the country to a standstill, but some very unpleasant news articles and items, couldn't you?
Mm.
Scenes of hospitals in turmoil.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, we shall see.
Yeah, we
Christmas,
go.
the next 5 days, and New Year. Hopefully, there'll be peace and goodwill to all men, including the health secretary and the resident doctors.